So this is the first video in a series of Harrier builds for the Century of Conflict group build run by Ref Basic Modeling. So our first exploration is going to be a Harrier GR1 as operated from Belize in 1975. And to set a little background, we're just going to chat about Harrier operations in Belize, what was all that about, why they were there, then have the unboxing, and then into the build vid. Now please, this video is going to go on a bit, I ramble on a bit, and so please skip as you see necessary or whatever, but I think particularly with this series of builds and my overview in general, the background story is important. So let's begin. In 1975, with Guatemala in the grip of a bloody civil war, there's a real fear that Guatemalan forces might invade Belize and at the very least widen their Caribbean coastline. To bolster the resident British garrison, a detachment of 6 Harrier GR1s from No. 1 Squadron was sent to Belize International Airport in November 1975. They set about waving the flag and discouraging Guatemala aggression. After several months, the threat was perceived to have subsided, and the Harriers returned back to UK in April 1976, only to return on a more permanent basis in June 1977 as part of a complete package with the Queen's Regiment of the British Army. A VC-10 and 6 Harriers of No. 1 Squadron flew direct with support from 10 Handley Page Victor tankers. Thus was born Hardnet Belize. The 6 aircraft were operated from semi-permanent hides named using the NATO phonetic alphabet. Alpha and Bravo hides were set up in the grounds of the Belkin Brewery outside the gates of the garrison. Charlie and Delta hides were set up on the other side of the garrison access road. Echo hide either never existed or formed the basis of the tie-down engine running pan at the eastern end of the runway. Foxy and Gulf hides were set up around the airport fire station, which remained active, even using some of the fire station buildings. Hotel India and Juliet hides were arranged around the access runway to Williamson hangar at the edge of the airport apron. After operating as a rotating enrollment for 2 years, Hardnet was put on even more permanent footing with the formation of number 1417 Tactical Ground Attack Flight, 1417 TGA flight, from April 1980 until the closure in July 1993. Much flying was done, with plenty of flag waving and saber rattling, the aircrew enjoying the post due to the lack of restrictions and challenging missions. It should be noted that if you are interested in Harriers with nose art and names, looking into Harrier operations in Belize does provide some more interesting marking schemes. Hence the aircraft I'm building features a shark mouth markings, and there are also other images. I remember seeing art for one aircraft called Beach Buggy. So those kind of operations, I think the ground crew and aircrew had a little bit more flexibility. Eventually operations were confined to Charlie, Delta, Foxy and Gulf hides, which went through slow metamorphosis to permanent and semi-hardened hides with concrete surfaces and taxiways and block-built buildings, including accommodation, kitchen and the all-important bars. Now, while Guatemalan fire and action never accounted for any of the Harriers, accidents and the local bird life seemed to be rather more effective at inflicting losses, and over the deployment 3 Harriers were lost, and unfortunately including one in a fatal accident where the pilot flew into the ground. In particular, there was, and while it is fortunate that the aircraft survived, XZ GR132 encountered a large vulture which tore straight through the bird strike armor in the intake, making a large hole in the starboard fuselage tank. This was while the aircraft was approaching to land. The contents of the fuel system promptly gushed out of the hole, causing a large cloud of fuel vapor as the aircraft approached to land. After stopping on the runway, the pilot could see the damage caused by the vulture, and he said he would have ejected if he'd known the extent of the damage. XZ132 was sent back to the UK, repaired, and sent off to war in the Falkland Islands, albeit with a leaking front tank. Rumours that the bird was posthumously decorated by the Argentinians are totally unfounded. So, that's a little bit of the background, the story, various Harrier marks. I think most notably the Harrier GR3 saw service in Belize. The subject of this build will be a Harrier GR1, so we're looking at very much 1975 operations. So that's a bit of the background, and now on with the unboxing and then the build. This is the unboxing video for the Airfix Harrier GR1 for the Century of Conflict crew build, and it's going to be my first build for that. So this is the kit, and let's just start taking a look. Start off with the instructions, as we so often do. So this kit has been around for a little while, and it's one of the many Airfix Harrier kits, and if any company is going to throw itself into the Harrier, it's going to have to be Airfix. So starts off with a nice multi-part seat, into the straightforward cockpit tub, instrument panel, decal for the instruments, pilot figure, always good to see, and Airfix, they base it on one of their members of staff, the facial features. Then, this is what I quite like, a good intake, such a prominent feature on the Harrier that you do need a decent intake assembly. And being done in two halves, so you've got the wheel well there, avionics bay aft of the cockpit, and then the fan slides in. Going in, you have the aft wheel well, the fuselage halves coming together. You've got the aft gear wheel well, then tail plane going together, tail cone, I think with an ECM pod or some electronics package, wing halves going on top. This gives the Harrier relatively little fuselage seam to worry about on the filling. Then the intakes, and with two sets depending when you got the aircraft on the ground or in flight. I will be doing this in flight, so I'll be doing it with that set of the auxiliary intakes, and I do like how this goes on. That's always been one of the features of the Harrier that models, particularly in 172nd, often fail to really bring out. On then with the four pylons, the Pegasus engine nozzles, the two Aiden cannon, and then on with the undercarriage. Now I'm going to be displaying this wheels up with brass pins going through it, so I'm going to have to be quite clear early on where I'm putting the brass pins and put some evergreen strip on the inside. Then the ordnance options. I will be doing this with the pair of drop tanks, the Aiden cannons, and the rocket pods. Canopy closed, the GR1's nose, and then these are the colour scheme options that come with the kit. Number 1 Squadron and number 20 Squadron. So Wittering and Guttisch and Wildenrath in Germany. However, as I'm doing this for Belize, I have a set of decals specially for this, and there's a little bit of a tail there. So let's take a quick look at the sprues. Nice, quite heavy, but recessed panel line, so this really will lend itself to washes and weathering. I like the slightly off grey with a hint of blue plastic that Airfix often use, because it's easier then to identify the undercoat. Nice to, yeah, you're gonna have to be a little bit of clearing up on some of the pin locations, but they are quite well done. They're not on major surfaces, so not a horrendous amount of cleaning up to do. Likewise, the wing, the mold points are on mating areas, which is another nice touch. Well done, Airfix, on a lot of these. You do feel that this kit is very much, I think it's been well engineered with modelers in mind. The other fuse and a half with your intake, auxiliary intake, louvre options, drop tanks, the Aiden gun pods, the nose for the GR1 variant, and then the tail surfaces, more cockpit details, aft wheel well, the forward fan. All of this, you really feel good, easy to work panel lines, nice crisp moldings, and no flash. So very happy with this, with nice clear location points on the rocket pods. Now the decals. I bought the Extradecal. Now I should explain, I got this kit, I believe it was a second-hand one from Hannon's, and it came with the Extradecal set. The only trouble is the chap had used the one decal set that I wanted to use, which for Belize happened to be this rather nice set with the shark's mouth. So, and they were the one set he had used, so I'm going to be doing it in this scheme. So Harrier GR, oh, it says GR3 here, but it's a GR1 nose on. Okay. Well, I thought it was a GR1, but anyway, I'm not too worried. It looks like a GR1 to me. With maybe some GR3s had the original non-laser nose, but shark's mouth decal, which I really like. So this is the one I'm going to be doing. Hot to trot of No1 Squadron Belize in 1975. So that's the one I'm doing in these markings. Which is, it's interesting that the camouflage scheme is completely wraparound, whereas the others seem to be grey on the other side. That particular one has a colour scheme that goes the whole way around, which is makes a rather interesting difference, except with on the underside, except on the Aiden cannon and on the underside of the drop tanks. So it makes a more interesting scheme. I will certainly be having fun with that. So nice Extradecal set. These are actually a decal company, I believe, that are owned and managed by Hannon's themselves, as was Extra Kit and their Extra Paint set. Extra Paint. So you get a nice range in this, but you have to use the kit decals for the main stencils. Anybody wanting to do a Norwegian Harrier, got a nice scheme for that there as well. Or Harrier in Arctic region operations. So a bit of a zip through with this. I must profess, I'm quite happy with this, looking forward to it going together. And it's just one of those kits you sort of want to crack on with. I don't see it presenting any major issues. So this should build quite quickly and quite nicely. I've got reference photos ready, and I just want to crack on with this one. It's going to be displayed on a frame So I have this small picture frame, and it's going to be in this orientation with the Harrier. And just grab another Harrier I previously built. This is an old Hasegawa Harrier, so it's going to be displayed something like that, with background photos and info around it. So that's the plan for this one. And we'll see how this project progresses. Hopefully a good, quick and enjoyable build. This is next part of the Harrier build. It's an Airfix kit, these recent ones, so they go together like it's on rails. So a few things to point out. I'm going to be attaching this to the display with pins going through either this side or through the Aiden gun pod mounted on this side. So for that reason I've bulked this part of the fuselage with some evergreen pieces, just to give any location pins. Now the pins may go through the gun pod and into the blocks, and then the pin in the other direction going horizontally into the gun pod itself. So this is where the loads of, even though the loads are minuscule, something like this is very light, but this is where the loads from the model are going to be transferred into the base. And so you want something reasonably solid to take those forces. There's tiny marks here where the gun pod attach, where the Aiden gun pods attach. So I'm probably, because I want a really solid joint, I'm going to attach the gun pods ahead of it, in an earlier phase of assembly. I mean literally before painting. Probably putting pins that go through here, fill the gun pods themselves with something like milliput, let that set, and then do it that way, which just means that I've got like a solid mass here that will take the brass rods. So that's one objective. It's going to be built gear up, so I'm keeping everything closed off, the wheel well and that side of it. Parts go together like they're on rails, which is really, really nice. As somebody who has a real love for A model kits and such like, you know, test fit the whole time, and things just go together so nicely. Makes it an absolute pleasure. A little bit of a seam there, and I don't know, I sometimes think that a certain degree of flex is almost expected in these things. So this lower seam here might need a little bit of work. This aft seam may well be workable without the need of filler, and there is actually a seam on the real aircraft along there, which just leaves you a tiny seam line here and along your nose. A lot of this I think can be eliminated by light sanding after applying the glue, so it's not going to be significant seam work at all. Bearing in mind that this seam is also very well obscured by the gun pods, and in this case the scheme is wraparound camouflage. It's a little bit odd to me, I prefer two-tone, but it is wraparound camouflage. So that's going to make it quite entertaining. As I say, cockpit, no major issues. I may be hitting things with a coat of green. I'm not sure whether I'm really going to be diving into painting today. Main reason being is I'm just a bit freaking tired. Came back from London today, and it's just nice to get back to the bench. Or I may see, I want to spray inside so the air intakes are going to need spraying. That's something I may well leave for tomorrow, just in more of a crash out mode today, or just chill out mode a bit, as I'm feeling the tiredness is sort of catching up with me. Hello. Having fun with it, liking the way it's going together. This is just a kit that is on rails. So this is progress on the Harrier GR1 from Belize. I was really hoping to bring the fuselage halves together without the need for any filling. Unfortunately, I took the approach of applying the Timmy extra thin, putting clamps on it, and then leaving that overnight. That actually caused a little bit of misalignment, which gave a tiny lip. So what I've had to do is I applied masking tape, put fillers, a seam of Ref filler, and then just sanded it and blended it back. A little bit on the upper fuselage, but there is fortunately quite a lot of actual seam lines on the actual aircraft, so it's only really this area here and this area here you need to ensure that you've taken the seam lines off. So all the way back and along the wing there is a seam line. Lower fuselage definitely needs the treatment as well. So I'm reasonably happy with the way this is going. She's coming together quite well. I think it's a nice kit. Goes together without any really significant issues. As I say, I put the strip on the inside so that I'll take the brass rods. I also drilled out the locations that line up on the Aiden cannons, because basically this filling and sanding could have really obliterated those positions, so I wanted to highlight them and not lose them. Overall, yeah, I think there's a little bit of a lip here with the auxiliary intake ducts, and you can see that there is a small, very slight fit issue on the intakes. I think that's a very close tolerance fit, and they probably need just a tiny, I've glued them now, but I think in future they just need a tiny touch with sandpaper on a sanding sponge or whatever sanding surface, just to make sure they sit right. A lot of bit of pre-painting with the intake ducts and the cockpit and that side of it. Again, I undercoated in green, chromate green, and then overlaid with the actual colors I want. Gear wells are going to be put in the closed position. As this aircraft is going to be like in a flying stand on a flying display with the cockpit closed. So yeah, liking how it's going together. Nice snug fit of the wing, and you very rapidly move into something that looks quite Harrier-y. So no complaints with this whatsoever. Now that I've done this little vid recording, I can glue my wing in place. Okay, here's progress with the 1/72 scale Airfix Harrier. Gone together quite well. A little bit of filling and sanding needed, which is fairly inevitable, but I think had I been a little bit more careful I could have avoided this. So along this upper fuselage here, lower seam here, a little bit of rescribing, bit of filling needed around the nose. What I do need to do, I mustn't forget to do this, is tidy up this seam here along the leading edge of the wing. That's a little bit awkward, so I'll run a bit of beater filler across there. I'm going to do as I normally do, undercoat it fully in the chromate green. That's going to happen fairly soon. Then hit it with a base of the grey, sea grey, and then build up from there. I think it's gone together quite well, as Airfix as the more recent Airfix kits tend to do so. I like. Some people complain about the Airfix plastic. Personally, I like it. I like how it works. I like how it feels, and this kit is well engineered. A lot to enjoy about this, and no major issues. Other parts I've got ready. As I am going to be mounting it facing in this direction, I've got the extra plastic on the inside under this area, and I'm going to be popping now with the Aiden cannons going on. I will be filling this side with milliput, and then I will see about looking at the height. That might be a good position to, or at least going in next to the cannon, which may actually be a slightly better approach. I can put it into the area where I've got the extra plastic located, so that when you're looking at the model side on, the mounts are sort of obscured from view by the cannon. So when you're looking at this way on, the two mounting rods are going to come in from this side, and the plastic rods, the brass rods, will be sort of obscured by the cannon. That's the whole idea, and it also means that when they go in, they won't. There's no risk of collision with the ordnance that's going to be hanging off the wing. So that's the strategy there. I was going to put them into the cannon pod, but I think that's going to create problems and maybe get a little bit messy and awkward. So that is a strategy I won't be taking. And I have just realised, oh, I've got the cannon, there we go. Sorry, I had the gun pod on the wrong side. So yes, that's a strategy I'm taking with this. Never realised it went that far back. That's my perception of it. Anyway, so I'm reasonably happy. Needed a little bit of extra filler because I didn't want to obliterate detail here on the nose. I actually put in shim strip. Now I started with this thin plastic card. I then sanded it down to the point where it's nearly translucent. Just really took it down in thickness, cut thin strips, and I could slip it into this gap here. As a type of shim, as opposed to using filler. And I think this is a strategy, something I might use a little bit more, particularly for some thin gaps where you got a step, you don't have any choice, you're going to have to go down the filler road. Cockpit masks up quite well, but you've got the very prominent windscreen wiper, so hopefully that will paint up okay. I say the Harrier is quite a small, dinky little jet. Dare I say it borders on cuddly. One thing point of worthy of note is this aft air brake. It's really designed to be displayed open even if the aircraft is in flight mode, and if you want to display it closed, it sits far too proud on this edge, so you really need to sand down the inside face here and do a bit of work. I didn't want this dangling down. I think it looks a bit ugly. So I had to do quite a bit of work sanding down the inside face to get this air brake to sit properly in flight mode. That was a little bit annoying. I think that could have been done better by Airfix. I don't go with this everything must be displayed open mindset. The cockpit, in all fairness, is something that works well either way, and I think that's always been one of the nice things about the Harrier, that the design of the cockpit lends itself to it being displayed open or closed. But this feature, this air brake, if you want to display closed, it needs quite a bit of work. If you look at your reference pics, there isn't a massive step here, and this actually blends in and sits quite flush. That isn't well represented on the kit at all, so you need to pay attention to this. And I think the fittings for the hinge are just way too big if you want to display it closed. So that, I think, is an issue. You also need to pay quite a lot of attention to the fitting of the air intakes. The tolerances on this are very close indeed, so it's easy to get a step or a lip. Now, it doesn't look too bad, but I feel, yeah, this area is quite delicate in terms of fit. Overall, though, like I would say most post 90, well, post 2000 or 2000 onwards Airfix kits, the quality is really, really nice, and so much to enjoy about building this. There really is, and I'm having a great deal of fun with it. Really, from starting this at a weekend to where I am now, I am really quite happy with it. So, a little update. Bit of progress on the Harrier. Main painting is done, and as is some panel line wash. I applied the Flory model panel line wash. I applied the decals from the Extradecal set, so all of those are on, and with those on, I then sealed it up with some clear. It wasn't flat clear, it was semi-gloss clear X35. Now I put that down before I put the decals. Put the decals, as I say, the Extradecal set on, then sealed up those decals before I move on to the generic decals with all the stencils and bits that would be on a Harrier, whichever one you're particularly doing. So that's the approach I'm taking with this. There's holes there for the mounting rods where it will be displayed on the picture frame. Trying to position it so once the ordnance is hanging, those rods will be suitably obscured unless you really, sort of strain to look for them. So I like how this is going. The shark's tooth markings are always nice to see on an aircraft, and they seem to fit this little Harrier quite well. A little bit silvering in places, but some of that will be hidden when I apply some Tamiya weathering powders. I'm going to, as I often do, lighten off the trailing edges and create a little bit of color contrast, and to just do some general decal blending. So I'll put down the second layer of decals, then a layer of clear to seal them up, then the weathering powders, and then a layer of flat to seal everything up after that. So it would have really had, been built up carefully. So really like 3 layers of clear coats just to tie everything down. a kit that you can't really go too far wrong with. It very, very nicely engineered by Airfix, and all credit to them for producing a kit like this. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Been a little bit tricky. I haven't had so many free weekends to spend time at the bench, so I've been doing this mostly during the evenings when I get home from work, but still thoroughly enjoyable build so far. So here we are. I must admit, I dived a bit headfirst into the base yesterday, and I just sort of banged this out in one go. Now, I started off by cutting out the Lexan panel, which I had some scrap Lexan polycarbonate. I used the glass as the template, and then used a Stanley knife to progressively cut round, multiple cuts till I'd trim that out of the piece. I think from the piece I've got, I can do one more frame larger than this one, and that'll be for the next Harrier build. So what you've got here is I actually started off by trying to do this on paper and sprayed the backing sheet that came with the frame originally, and then had it black, and then had to go frame that silver. That really didn't work out as an idea, but what I ended up doing is spraying the MDF sheet on the back. I sprayed that black, and then I used the Vallejo Metal Air over it to give an aluminium colour. I then used my circle. I then sprayed the red circle for the RAF roundel, or the area. I'd worked out what size I wanted this to be anyway, so identifying where I wanted the centre of the roundel, I sprayed an area of red. I then cut out, let that dry a bit, overlaid it with masking tape, and then using my circle template, scribed out the inner and outer circles. Now, with the red having been sprayed on, I was able to take away the masking tape for the blue, sprayed on a layer of grey, and then I sprayed on the blue just using standard X4 blue. Maybe came out a bit darker than it should have, but fair enough. I then took the good old scribing tool and just put in some panel lines, and then sharpened up a pin, put that in a pin vise, and using a circle template cut out a series of rivets, which I've applied on here. The goal was to create the image of like an aircraft skin, and probably you should have had maybe on something like this one panel line, and the rivets. This doesn't have a specific sense of scale. Also, before I started, because I had a couple of locations here and here, I covered those holes over with a bit of plastic card, just to create some variation. I don't think I should have just honestly filled that and sanded it back, but I was sort of charging ahead a little bit with this, so I don't think these were done too well. They're a bit out of they're not brilliant. I did want some tonal variation though, so got the scriber out, marked in the panel lines, and then I used this material that I originally was going to use for the background, and cut out just rivet heads, which I glued in place at a spacing to give it an impression of the aerospace fasteners, countersunk fasteners. They're sitting a bit proud. And allowed for some tonal variation that you'd have when you'd like repaint them on the panel. Now, I'd already printed these labels onto adhesive sheet and stuck those on. Then I hit everything with a layer of Johnson's Clear just to seal it all up. So I think the next one I do of this, I'm going to get plastic card as the backing. It just spraying the MDF like that didn't work out the best and didn't give the right texture and finish. But I think for what we're doing, it's working out okay. So you've got a news article from a Harrier deployment, No1 Squadron badge, map showing where Belize is, and then the indication of what the subject matter is. No1 Squadron Harrier GR1 XV787 Hot to Trot, which was the name that had been given to the aircraft, a bit of nose art, and this is Belize 1975. So I'm still on the decaling phase, so I've got the two brass rods cut, and when it's time to mount the aircraft, I will indicate what their position is, and then again, because this is a plastic front, I can drill through this, and they're short enough that it'll go through the material and sit with the wingtip quite close to the panel and sit like that. Now maybe this is whole frame and setting is a bit big for such a small aircraft. Yeah, that's something I kind of accept. It's maybe a bit overdone. But it's like trying out new ideas, new approaches. So quite well, reasonably happy with how this turned out. Some things I would do differently. It's maybe a little bit messy around here. The glue I used to attach it is showing through a bit. But you know, at a reasonable distance on the table at a show or hanging up on the wall, it'll look okay. The roundel, I'm going to have this. I'm going to maybe do a Royal Navy roundel, or another roundel like this in the next project. The frame for that one's going to be a bit bigger, so it's that size, and in that case the two Harriers will be going something like that and like that. So I have two Harriers, info about the Falklands, and then the GR5 and the GR7, GR3 and the Sea Harrier are going to be mounted one above the other. Same idea to go for wall hanging. So this is working out okay. I'm quite happy in the direction it's going, and I'm quite happy with the way this turned out. I'll just try some different approaches with the next one, but keeping elements of this theme throughout this series of at least 5 Harrier builds. So here it is, completed. The Harrier GR1 Hot to Trot Belize 1975. My first build of the Century of Conflict group build. Mounted up on its wall display base so that it can be hung up. This was the kit used, and I must admit, an absolutely lovely pleasure to build. Went together with no significant or major issues. Maybe some fitting around the nose intake, and I had to replace the pitot tube with a pin. That's quite normal for me because I managed to break the things off. Just like the way it went together, nicely engineered kit. Decals were from Extradecal, which included an option for this specific aircraft, Hot to Trot, from Belize. And then all the stencils came from the kit decals, so a mix of the two. Picture frame, just from a normal the range, and then painted up this background sort of represent an aircraft fuselage panel RAF roundel, and then added to that picture of a GR1 in Belize, No1 Squadron marking, little map showing where Belize is, Cuba being there. So it's very much a Central American country on the southern Mexico border, and the whole issue why the British forces there because of Guatemala applying pressure and hoping to invade, and our forces, and they still are deployed here to sort of maintain the sovereignty of Belize. I believe it's a crown colony or something like that, some leftover from the British Empire. Also, nice little name title there. Base was painted with Vallejo metallics, and next time I'm not going to paint that directly onto the MDF. It didn't work out that well in my mind. You can see the difference in the finish with the plastic, and that was the same base. So I'm going to probably, for the next build, which is going to be the 2 Falklands Harriers, I'm going to put some plastic card, a thin sheet of plastic card on top of the MDF, and then work on that. Still going for a similar sort of approach. I think I'll just have a much better finish and appearance. Some fake rivets put in as well. Not sure how those turned out, or how people think they turned out. They just add a little more character to it. Again, I'm going to do those differently in the next one. Probably make them a little bit smaller and a bit less pronounced. So, as you can see, it's gone together quite well. A bit of weathering. It didn't really do any paint chipping. The weathering was Flory Models black weathering wash and some Tamiya weathering powders. Before the decals went on, I sealed up the model with semi gloss clear. I then put on a coating of after the basic decals from Extradecal went on, and before I did the stencils, I put another coat of clear on, and then after I'd done the stenciling and applied some weathering powders just to tone and tidy a few things up, I then applied a final coat of clear, so everything has been well sealed up under a number of layers of Tamiya clear coat, which will give it the decals in particular, some longevity, and should stop them flaking off in the future. So reasonably happy with that. You can see looking down in the air intake, maybe a little bit messy in here, but overall no major issues, no major complaints with this as a build. As I say, the next base is going to be slightly different. I like how the roundel came out, and there's going to be just a few other things. Well, this marks the first in a series of 5 or 6 Harrier builds I'm undertaking. Next one is going to be the Sea Harrier and a Harrier GR3 from Falklands Operations, and then after that will be Harrier GR7 and Sea Harrier FRS2 from the Balkans operations, all for Century of Conflict group build. And if I'm lucky and if I can get the kit, I may even squeeze in a US Marine Corps AV-8B. So as I say, I'm quite happy with this. It'll sit in here for a couple of days, and then it'll go up and be hung up on a wall. I've got a bit of wall space that Mrs. is allowing me to have. This is on a patch of on a little area of wall in the hallway that's going to become dedicated to the Harrier, and there's going to be a series of presentations like this hanging on there. The little Harrier zone in the house. All different aircraft. I think No1 Squadron is going to get quite well represented in this, though. And so I'm going to be honest with you, I had serious fun with this. A lot to enjoy about it. Got this base done in one day. The kit built pretty much over 3 weeks, I would say, bearing in mind that this was the first weekend or even the Saturday I've had to devote to this. So this was mostly weekday builds, which for me is quite unusual. I have one Saturday. I had one Saturday that I threw into on building time, but not normally as many as I would over a build. And I was in London for the Jubilee weekend. You know, for me, this was a fast build. Normally, something like this would take me a full month, and I can say I've done this in about 3 weeks. And I'm quite chuffed with that. I'm actually very chuffed with that. I'm happy with the way it's gone, specifically given the time scale. Yeah, some things I could do better, definitely. I'd say the fit around here I'm not particularly happy with. That's a bit ropey, to say the least. Well, not as good as it should be, and I'll pay more attention to it as I crack on with a Falkland Sea Harrier next. So that's where we are, and well, after this you'll have a series of pics. So thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and thank you for following this build.